6:30 on Monday, December 6th, 2021, and I would look for a motion to go into closed session.
I move, go in closed session.
Thank you, Arlen. Bruce, second.
Okay, can I get a roll call?
think we do a roll call.
Green? Here. Howery?
Yes.
Halverson?
Yes.
Fisher?
Here.
And Prebino, yes.
Okay, we will move across the hall to a different locale.
All right, and I'll be ending the webinar, and we'll reopen it when open session begins again.
Consent agenda items contains the minutes from the November 15th board meeting and November 29th special board meeting. It also contains our latest financial transactions and 3 professional and 2 co-curricular staffing recommendations. The agenda also contains 9 personnel items that are unnecessary for vote. A list of each of these personnel transactions is listed on your board agenda. And I'll go ahead and move to accept the consent agenda item as presented.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to
Public comments.
public comments. We have multiple public comments this evening, and members of the board will take turns reading those. I will start.
Craig, would you be comfortable if I invited members of the public to register if they wish?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just one moment. All right. If you would like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we would ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I would transfer you over to speak to the board. Thank you.
All right, we'll get started then. I'll start with Amy, and I apologize if I mispronounce this last name, Babala, Main Street, McFarland. We were shocked and extremely disappointed to learn in a Capital Times article dated December 3rd that our district superintendent received a letter on November 19th from Janelle Heinrich, Madison Public Health Director, Public Health Madison and Dane County, informing all districts in the county that Public Health Madison-Dane County does not approve of any district allowing people who are not vaccinated to forego quarantine unless they are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. The letter states, COVID-19 is unique to many other diseases in that there is a significant contagious period that occurs for some people who are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. In this regard, quarantine is a particularly important tool to reduce disease spread in households, workplaces, schools, and elsewhere. We are aware that some schools are considering changing how they follow quarantine guidance from Public Health Madison-Dane County, Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control by no longer excluding from school the asymptomatic students who should be quarantined as a close contact of a positive case. Isolation and quarantine continue to remain important communicable disease prevention tools to prevent disease spread. Ensuring that people who are at increased risk of contracting COVID-19, a highly infectious disease, do not attend school while they are potentially infectious is critical for preventing outbreaks that could result in others becoming ill and not being able to attend work or participate in in-school learning. It also states, to be clear, schools cannot redefine quarantine or close contact or declare that they are ending quarantine for individuals. These are public health terms that have implications beyond the school setting. Schools cannot say to someone who knows that they were exposed to COVID-19 that they do not need to quarantine. They do. After receiving this letter and guidance from our public health officials, whose job is it to keep our children and our communities safe and healthy? We are wondering how it is that the board voted to ignore these clear recommendations and remove the requirements for close contacts to quarantine if they are not exhibiting symptoms. Was the board aware of this letter at the time of the meeting where this decision was made? We are also wondering why the community wasn't given an opportunity to provide input on this protocol change. When the board was considering a change to the masking protocol, a survey was sent to parents and there was notice given at the board meetings that the change would be discussed. We would ask you to please do everything that you can to keep our children and our community safe during a pandemic. especially as we are seeing cases rise again and we are again facing the uncertainty of a new variant. Please follow the guidelines from Public Health, Madison-Dane County, Department of Health Services, and the CDC. They also want children to be in school as much as possible, and they have made their recommendations with that goal in mind. Thank you for your service to our community. Amy Babila and Clyde Drake. Kate, you want to hit one?
Sure. So this is from Samantha Zelinga, 3615 Rankin Road. Good evening. My purpose of writing in tonight is in regards to the new quarantine policy. Why was the public not warned of this vote ahead of time and given time for input? I'm sure most of you have seen the article from the Cap Times, which includes a letter the director of the PHMDC wrote to schools in Dane County. Here is a quote. To be clear, schools cannot redefine quarantine or close contact or declare that they are ending quarantine for individuals. These are public health terms that have implications beyond the school setting. Schools cannot say to someone who knows that they were exposed to COVID-19 that they do not need to quarantine. They do. I'm wondering if the school board members were given a copy of this letter, or did the administration keep it to themselves? This letter uses strong language to urge schools to keep quarantines. Was this ignored by the board, or did the administration keep it quiet to receive less disagreement with their plan? Disagreements are fine and are to be expected. However, if this letter was kept from the board, that is secretive, manipulative, and not the full transparency that Dr. Anderson spoke of when he took this current position. Of course, this letter is a recommendation and not a mandate. But again, I ask you, why aren't we following the recommendations of the health department? Why does anyone in the school district feel they know more about public health than our health department? We should not be teaching our children to ignore professionals, and ignoring PHMDC recommendations is doing just that. Thank you, Samantha Zelinga.
Dr. Anderson?
I'm reading one from Liz Reiser Lober. After discovering the letter from PHMDC that was withheld from the board, Dr. Merwin should not be the sole contact for medical knowledge during a pandemic. The administration should know better than to present inadequate information to the board. Proper quarantine protocols need to be reinstated. Close contacts and tracing needs to be done correctly. The data provided does not add up to the rosy numbers presented. It is absolutely beyond reason to go against public health recommendations. Additionally, upon viewing multiple pictures from parents, sharing various sporting events and more, the proper use of masks is not being enforced. What's the point of having protocols at all if they're not properly done? We are all exhausted by the pandemic. The sooner protocols are followed, the sooner we can all move on.
Bruce?
My letter is from Danica Smith, 5976 Holter Road. Dear administration and school board members, my name is Danica Smith. I'm a former educator of almost 20 years, 8 of those years at McFarland High School, during which time I earned a master's degree in professional development. I am currently employed in the field of health and wellness, specializing in mind management with a certification in integrated nutrition, and am currently pursuing certification in cognitive behavioral therapy. I have a daughter who is currently enrolled at McFarland High School. McFarland High School graduate of 2021, and I have been a member of this community for over 17 years. Today I'm speaking to you from each of these arenas on the topic of mask requirements and COVID quarantine for the McFarland School District. My purpose is to touch on the areas of perspective, leadership, science, and a sprinkling of personal and professional opinion as they relate to this matter. In addition, I have many questions that I look forward to having answered. It is my hope and expectation that all board members who serve to represent the voice of a whole population possess the necessary high level of emotional intelligence to separate personal opinion from fact and not base their decisions on personal fear or the fear of those around them. Fear clouds judgment and leads to problem-focused thinking rather than progressive solution-focused thinking. An even greater hope and expectation in the role of a person making such an important decisions for the greater whole is to have a clear understanding of perspective. COVID is a multidimensional obstacle with easily accessible information that is heavily swayed by the media. I would expect all members in this leadership role to not only separate their own personal biases from their decisions, but to gather data from a multitude of resources, including those not as easily accessible up to the surface level thinker. In my opinion, the aforementioned hope and expectations have been severely lacking. We are a fear-based district. It has come to my attention that there are a few things happening that require explanation. There are members of the school board, faculty, and staff who are openly sharing personal opinions regarding the way the COVID-related decisions should be happening and who should and shouldn't have a voice in making the decision. Is this the standard of leadership that meets your expectations in representing the school district? From a behavioral lens, my observation is that some school board members, faculty, and staff are also speaking openly with the community and on social media to create alliances, foster division, share biased opinions, complain, and threaten to leave if their version of reality is not supported. These are not simply just conversations amongst the closest of friends. Is this the standard of leadership that meets your expectations or that you want to represent this school district? You're in the middle of a situation no one has faced, having to make decisions no one has had to make. This is the time when all who are involved in decision-making need to be putting on extra conscious effort into staying away from their own feelings, beliefs, opinions, and fears, so a logical decision based on all data and research can be made. These are the voices that represent our students and their families. These are the voices that represent me and my family. My expectation standards are higher than what I am witnessing. I support masks optional for all students regardless of age or vaccination status effective November 28, 2021. I also support a quarantine policy that does not segregate the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. The duration of quarantine should be consistent to all. Based on history, many faculty, staff, board members have voiced their fears about coming back to school, not wearing masks, not social distancing, not having vaccines, etc. All fears. The narrative has been focused on the fear of what could happen, but not on what is actually happening or how to prevent that fear from becoming reality. Based on brain science, the role of the brain is to prove a thought. What I see happening is that a large majority of faculty and staff, also community and board members, is proving that misery loves company. This is like fueling a fire. When the fire is strong, the brain will prove a thought with example after example until it becomes a perceived fact in your mind. It is a very single-focused way of thinking that lacks intellect. For example, if I do not want people to stop wearing masks because I am afraid I will get COVID and possibly die, my brain will look for every reason possible to prove why that is correct. Unless I have an awareness around this, I will miss all the data that suggests this is quite the opposite of reality. What a waste of time. Time that could have been used on a solution-focused approach and moving through obstacles. This cannot be what is driving our decision-making process. Are faculty and staff worried about getting COVID if there are no mask requirements? If so, does this mean they do not believe or trust in the science of the vaccine they chose to take to protect themselves? If the purpose of the vaccine is to protect the vaccinated from becoming severely ill, what is the concern with removing mask requirements? Yes, people can still get and spread COVID after being vaccinated, but wasn't the goal in getting the vaccine to protect yourself from getting sick from COVID if you were exposed? If teachers are so concerned about preventing COVID or any of those thousands of ailments that pose a threat to their lives, it would be logical that we would see each and every one of them making their health a priority and not partaking in maskless activities outside of the workday. When outside of Dane County, the mask should then be worn at all times around all people if the fear in removing masks is in being around maskless children. Unfortunately, that is not what I or others within the community see. This kind of behavior is extremely hypocritical. If this is the case, when will we move out of this fear-based cycle and find a successful way to move back into the real world where COVID will continue to exist for decades? This real world exists outside of Dane County, where kids are and have been attending school since the beginning of 2019-2020 school year, most of that time being unmasked and unvaccinated. I ask that you do your research here to see how these schools are moving forward without masks. If Reedburg is a school 5 days per week maskless, McFarland can too. If athletes can play without masks outside of Dane County and fill the stands with maskless spectators, McFarland can too. If people prefer to wear a mask because they believe it will protect them more effectively, by all means wear one. How can we stand by and watch with our own eyes all of these surrounding schools functioning successfully without masks and be so blind to think we are different? When the mask mandate is lifted and masks are no longer required, as they are not and have not been in numerous parts of the state and country, what is the data supporting the need to continue wearing masks? When I leave Dane County, life looks much different. People are attending large gatherings across the country, filling stadiums, festivals, restaurants, concerts, gyms, classrooms, and homes, all maskless. And these events are not major COVID super spreaders, even according to the media. Our students are gathering maskless in large groups outside of school on a regular basis. Why are we treating our schools as if they are their own island? If I'm correctly reading to the schedule of the release of mask wearing, it appears to align with the time frame in which vaccinations are available for younger children. Where is the research to support that masks do in fact lessen the risk of any children under the age of 18 from becoming seriously ill, hospitalized, or dying without a vaccination? Kids are getting COVID. They are not getting severely ill. They are not being hospitalized. They are not dying. Without vaccines and without masks. Please take these things into consideration, realizing that there are different perspectives backed by data that do not align with the narrative being portrayed. Please look outside the box, that is, at what is happening outside of the recommendations that are laid out before you. There are many questions we should be asking right now if we are paying attention to what is not being said or what is being silenced. As leaders in these major decisions, I'm asking you to pay attention to what is successfully happening around you in populations that are not masked or vaccinated. In regards to segregated quarantine policy, I'd like to inquire about where the value of education lies in this district. If vaccinated students are not required to quarantine after being exposed to COVID, yet we can still contract and spread the virus, what sense does it make to keep them in school where they will continue to spread COVID, most likely unknowingly, but require a non-vaccinated student who is showing no symptoms and may never be infected to quarantine for an extended period of time and miss instruction? That leads me to believe educating all students is not in fact the goal of our district. It is the goal then to keep them healthy. Would it not make sense for a student to test for COVID in that case rather than keeping them out of school? Is the COVID concern then more focused on protecting the health of the unvaccinated person who has chosen not to be vaccinated and has a higher chance of recovering successfully from COVID than from illnesses that do not get 1 second of consideration? What about the data showing the percentage of people who have recovered from COVID becoming reinfected with COVID? I assure you, based on my own research and asking medical doctors in our area, it is extremely rare to be reinfected, is the answer I've gotten. We cannot have a one-size-fits-all requirement for something that is not one size. The school nutrition program should be on trial for harming the future of children's health and increased risk of disease leading to death if the goal is to keep kids healthy. I'm asking you to look outside of your personal opinions and beliefs. Do the research. Look at all of the data, not the data that supports your belief, and ask yourself, what is the best for the kids? Kids are not filling hospitals. We need to take the masks off, stop living in fear, the fear created by the media, and collect this data on our own. Please do not blindly follow the science that is coming from one perspective. There is data showing a different perspective as well. It is also science. Please do not blindly follow in the footsteps of what some of the surrounding schools are doing because they fear what could happen. If there is one thing I could say about our district when I was an employee, it is that we were always innovative and big picture oriented. Please do not lose sight of that. Sincerely, Danica Smith.
Christine?
All right, this public comment is from Connie and Brady Showalter. Dear McFarland School Board members and Superintendent Anderson, I am writing today to express my concern regarding the change in the quarantine protocol for close contact unvaccinated students. This weekend, I read the article in the Cap Times and was very surprised to read the letter that Janelle Heinrich, Director of Public Health, Madison and Dane County, sent to all Dane County superintendents on November 19th, 2021. Why would you vote to change the quarantine protocol for unvaccinated students on November 29th after receiving this letter? During the November 29 meeting, the numbers were shared. 441 students, 6% tested positive. This means what the schools are doing is working. Another thing that was discussed was students in school being masked. They are masked most of the time, but they are not masked at lunch and sitting next to each other with little to no spacing. Some people spoke to how long students take to eat, and it was stated most students eat in less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes is not a magic number. COVID spread can still happen in a short time. Close contacts can almost always test on the same day they are notified. Test results tend to come back within 1 to 3 days. This means a student with a negative test result would be out of the classroom for a limited amount of time. This seems a small price to pay while working to keep COVID spread to a minimum. I would like to remind everyone that this is not just about the students and the teachers in the classrooms. This goes back into our homes, where we know there are children under the age of 5, immunocompromised relatives, friends, and others who, for medical reasons, cannot receive a vaccine. We owe it to our community to be safe in our schools. With Delta variant COVID numbers skyrocketing and the Omicron variant on its way to our community, please do not take away mitigation strategies. Do not drop masks. Do not change the original quarantine protocol for unvaccinated students, and follow all recommendations from PHMDC. Sincerely, Connie and Brady Showalter.
Thank you. Arlen?
This is from Mindy Marty, 5303 Black Walnut Drive. I would like for this below letter to be read out loud during the school board meeting this evening. Dear administration, the McFarland School Board members, and McFarland School Board members of McFarland School District, I have noticed that students playing basketball on the court during the basketball games and students in the fan section are not wearing masks. Dane County Public Health Department issued a mask mandate to be extended until January 3rd, 2021. What are you, the school district of McFarland, going to do to enforce the mask mandate during the sporting events, music events, and other extracurricular activities? This is Mindy Martin, 5303 Black Walnut Drive.
Thank you. I've got two remaining, both from Candace Pennekamp. The first was on November 29th, 2021. Hello, I'm writing once again to ask the board to remove the mask mandate and to remove any close contact quarantine policies regarding COVID. We have received emails from the district indicating that students are struggling to get back into school mode. McFarland currently has 89 students in quarantine. Tell me how this constant disruption in learning is good for any student. Why do we continue to quarantine healthy children? How does no one question this policy? Why are we quarantining children from outdoor exposure to COVID? Why are our athletes wearing masks? Why did our drama students wear masks during their production? Why do we leave this county and follow different rules? None of this makes sense to a rational person. You can tune out all of the noise and rhetoric that is going on around us and simply focus on the students in our district. How are they doing? How are they learning? Are they learning? Are they in school? Can they see each other and interact and connect in ways that are so important for health and well-being and learning? I think that maybe this is being overlooked because so much focus is on mask reminders and quarantines and contact tracing. Please take this policing away from your staff so that they can focus on what is really important. Sincerely, Candace Pennekamp. And the second is dated today, December 6th, Monday. Hello, I'm writing to express my support of the recent change to COVID protocols, specifically not requiring healthy students to quarantine. The article published by the Capital Times regarding this change in our policy highlights Public Health Madison-Dane County's attempts to strong-arm Dane County school districts into decisions that should be made by our own school districts with their guidance and suggestions. I commend this board for voting for a COVID policy that makes sense. Interestingly enough, the letter from Public Health Madison-Dane County also indicates Anyone with a positive COVID test within 90 days is exempt from quarantining. Are you tracking these students? Natural immunity is finally being recognized by Public Health Madison-Dane County. Once again, I'm asking that the staff and resources and energy move away from COVID protocols. It's time to focus on other glaring needs, such as our educational deficit and the mental health and well-being of our students. Lastly, I'm asking that board meetings be open to the public again. How did some board members not know this wasn't allowed anymore? Please consider allowing time and a different format to talk to parents and students. All of the surveys and emails are fine, but it's so important to see people and to be able to have a conversation. When did you stop having students talk at the board meetings? There has been important work going on by our students, especially at the high school level. You should invite the students to share this with you. Thank you for your time. And I believe that is it for public comments.
And I can confirm that we have not had anyone register to speak via Zoom.
Thank you very much, Angie. And we will move on to school board reports.
And I'm going to give the first one for Lauren, because Lauren had an extremely long and successful weekend with vaccinations, and I'll talk about that in a second. But annually, we need to go over the Pupil Non-Discrimination District Summary. And as you will notice from the sheet that was in your board books, we did have one complaint during this past 2020, in the 2021 school year, and it was based on race. And Lauren asked me to read the following statement. Each year, the district must submit to the Department of Public Instruction a report of the number of incidents of pupil discrimination or harassment that occurred during the previous year. As you can see from the report, there was an incident of harassment that was based on race. This incident was handled in a formal manner. Informally means no school board action. Formally means that school board action and/or it was resolved by another agency such as the Department of Public Instruction. Incidents are confidential, so I'm not able to speak to them. If you have any questions about the process, please email Lauren Arango. So we did figure it out for the 2021. We did have one incident of harassment, and that was based on race for the district. So each year, we'll go back. So next year, you'll hear from the 21-22 school year, but we did have one incident. You don't need to take action. It just needs to be presented.
Thank you. Moving along, it looks as though Mr. Mahoney is going to present our annual school safety written drill evaluation notification.
As similar to Dr. Anderson's report from Warren, this is no action, but for 2017 Wisconsin Act 143, we have 21-22 requirement checklists, of which on an annual basis we have to make sure that our blueprints and maps are up to date, which they are. On a triennial basis, we are to review our buildings and all of our protocols to determine if any changes have been completed. And I will share with you in a moment some of the changes that we had to make. And also the school safety assessment. We also have to make sure that we're doing our school safety trainings on an annual basis, and also school safety drills, which you guys actually approve routinely throughout the school year. The biggest activity that we go through goes through a checklist that is about 15 pages long. I didn't make a bunch of copies for you. And our last one was 18-19. And it goes through a multitude of items. Most notably is how are we doing the training, what training are we using, and what assessments are we using. The most notable thing back in 18-19 as we were going through the process with the updates with the 2017 Act 143 was implementing a threat assessment protocol and process. Our school district chose the Virginia Threat Assessment Program, of which was completed actually in 2018-2019, and was administrators pupil services departments, principals, and then down the road, staff that were interested as well. Actually, we have refreshers that have been going on. The A Council receives a refresher tomorrow on this process. So that was probably the biggest thing that we didn't have in our checkbox of things that we've been doing. And what I mean by things that we haven't been doing or we've been doing is, and I don't, this isn't any great topic compared to any of the other ones we've been dealing with lately, but this district, similar to other districts, go back to 1999 when Columbine happened. We have rebooted, relooked, we've looked at things ever since the 2005 Red Lake situation in Minnesota. We've had as local as the Weston High School back in 2006. The most startling one that still sticks with me is Sandy Hook, of which I've visited the site. We also had the Santa Fe, Texas piece, majority Stoneman, most recently Oxford, and even since then there's been another one. These are all heavy. These are all heavy for our staff, and every time we hear about them, we hear rhetoric of, well, what are you doing now? Well, I'm proud to say, and I think we should be very proud that we can talk about this topic, because our McFarland School District has invested, continued to reinvest in not only safety precautions that we can put in place, but also things like the threat assessments and the threat assessment trainings. I don't remember the quote. It came from a family that was involved in one of the shootings many years ago, just basically stating, you can't stop everything, you can try to prepare, and there might be a better outcome if your district takes those activities. That struck a nerve with the founder of I Love You Guys Foundation, the Keys family. They lost their daughter in a tragedy in Colorado. They took it upon themselves to take stuff like this, which school districts for many years, Bruce might remember this in his classroom, a packet. This would be the Cliff Notes. This would be the back end of all of those safety trainings. About 5 years ago, we switched over to the standard response protocol, of which this is the piece of paper that each of our, and I enjoy walking because I'm here as much. This is what we work with our students and staff via videos, via training by our police department, our student services, our principals. Behind that is a larger document, but it's not that binder. So what this family did, and actually our state of Wisconsin supports this program as well now, is they brought it down to common language that can be used between police departments, between the fire departments, between school district, and is very word friendly. It's not some of the stuff we used to do back in the early 2000s. So I'm proud to say that we've been working on that, and we'll continue to work on that. And I know this is a little bit more than just what we have to do with Act 143 that came out in 2017, but McFarland can be proud of the fact that they've taken it to as the next level as they can, as they need to. So we will continue to do the best we can.
Any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I noticed that for the two, I went through the two 15-page documents that are in here just to look at what what was under study and so on, or needed further study, just to see if there were any kind of red flags. And does the three people who oversee, I know it's Ethan, Stu, and Alicia, do they go through this training as well as part of their role in that? And I was just curious to know what other training they had I mean, they play such a big role being
Mhm.
with students and in the facilities all the time.
Well, in fact, in 2018, 2019, I didn't even have them listed. So in this one, we went through it,
Yeah.
partly because it is of its own entity per se, because community recreation, while we wouldn't have to do this for Act 143 per se, we have. So, and they went through the trainings.
Mhm.
They're included in trainings here at the high school. Police department spends extra time with them as well. When we've had it's been a long time since we had our last real activity, mock situation. I think we're talking about 7 years ago now, on a large scale.
Mhm.
They were a part of that then.
Mhm.
And things have changed since 7 years ago, how
Right.
we would respond.
And the buildings have changed, like
Yeah, the
I was-
buildings
I
have
was-
changed.
I was noticing like a couple of things, just placards, which,
Yep.
because it's a new building, things that are easily fixable, it sounds
And,
like.
18 years ago, we maybe had 10 cameras and they were just in one building.
Mhm.
Now we're up to 143 cameras.
Mhm.
Cameras don't stop things, but they can help speed up the process for dealing with a situation.
Is the training both ongoing and required
Yes,
for staff and administration as well?
yes.
And you're comfortable with the amount of training that we provide?
I think with all of the other trainings we do, we balance as much as we can the training
Sure.
activities.
I get it. Yep. Anybody else?
Well, this is certainly an improvement over those, I remember that. Is there been any studies, I know today in the paper, they talked about the fact that, like, Monona has now 2 police officers. Have we looked at that? Is there anything we're considering, or?
I can tell you just offhandedly that was mentioned briefly at the last joint village school board meeting. But it was mentioned in nothing more than passing. That might be a consideration. Now, I know that, are you talking, the article in the paper
Today.
today regarding the
Yeah, it listed.
dramatic uptick in physical confrontations that have been going on at the Madison schools, and they're wondering if they can find a direct correlation between the uptick in violence and the removal of the police officers from the buildings. Anybody have anything else for Jeff? If not, we'll move on to an update on the superintendent job posting.
Well, actually, I have a couple things before we get there.
Okay.
So first, as I mentioned, that Lauren had a very productive weekend. So we had the second round of our vaccination clinic this weekend. When everything was said and done, we had 1,923 vaccinations that were given over the 2 time periods we had.
Wow.
Those are both students and adults. This last time, of course, you remember the first time we had about 600. So means this past weekend we did double what we did the first time. So you had a lot of adults coming for booster shots, but it was just shy of 2,000 vaccinations over the past 2 days. So that's one I wanted to give a shout out to Lauren and all the people that assisted her to make that possible for our community. So just a little clap for Lauren.
Here, here. Bravo. Good going, Lauren and team.
And the second thing I want to bring up is that we talked about the 360 evaluation, which is something that I said I'd put out in December. So I sent the original one, a couple of comments that came back that I thought maybe it was a little long. So I went through and I reduced it. So if you have any further comment before I would send it out, or else I'm going to try to send it out this week. The results will go right to you. So you will be able to check each day and you'll be able to see, what the various responses are. So then sometime probably in January, or February, you can go over the results that you see with me. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, because as I wrote in my blog, actually wrote 2 blogs today, one for this week, one for next week, is that why would you want to evaluate the superintendent when he's only here for 1 year? And the answer is pretty the same. One is, I still have half a year, and if I can improve in the second half, then I want to improve in the second half. The second is it'll start giving you an idea of a process you can use in the future with your future superintendent. And also, it provides input for staff, because I think the input they provide will also give you some input on as you're looking at your superintendent. So my goal is to send that out. I have reduced it. Though I do think when the next superintendent comes in, you're going to want to add some of those back in. It may be lengthy, but there's lots of things that you're going to want to know. So if you have any additional changes you'd like me to make, please let me know, or else we're going to make those changes, send it out to staff, and then you will be able to start seeing the various comments and how people rate me.
I haven't looked at the update. I saw the original one. Do you think it covers, I was talking with my wife when we were walking, and I'm trying to figure out, you think it will cover adequately what you've done?
Oh, no, I expect some NAs. I mean, I took out the one section on business management because since we are starting the budget building process now, it would be hard for people to say, well, how did you do in building a budget?
Okay.
When they haven't seen me build a budget.
Okay.
But in the future, I think you're gonna need to add that back
Okay.
in.
Sure.
So,
So the changes were more just addressing your specifically.
Right, to make it a little shorter, to let people know it. And then this is a process that I'll use with the district department heads, such as Jeff, Lauren, and Melissa, and with the building principals. And then we'll go over that. So it's to get people accustomed to this is what it is, and it will be sent there to the individuals that they supervise. For me, since in reality, I should supervise everyone gets the opportunity of all categories to fill it out on me. So I expect to see some NAs. I expect to see a couple good comments. I expect to see a couple of bad comments, because that's the nature of an anonymous survey. But I think it should give you something to at least look forward to going future, and it will give me some information on, it was always good to get somebody else's perspective. Now, you also have several school safety. We talked about school safety. So you actually have 3 reports, because every time that we do a drill, we need to present a report to the board. So in your packet this week, you received 3 of them. The first was for McFarland High School on November 18th, and this was a hold drill. Then you received one from Wabisa Intermediate School on 11/22, which was also a hold. And Wabisa Intermediate School had one on December 1st, which was a lockdown drill. So every time that we have a drill of some type, we need to fill out a report. We need to give that report to the board so that there's a record of the various drills that we have, and you've been able to chance to see these. These don't require approval by the board, but it's something that we want you to know when they happen. And the last thing I have under the reports is future school board meetings. And we do have our next one coming up on the 20th. Yeah, 20th. And then on that agenda, I'm going to ask, put an agenda item on to have a special board meeting sometime in the beginning of January. Because later on, we're going to talk about the superintendent candidates and the applications. That will finish on January 2nd. So I would like to have a meeting. That next Saturday is January 8th, so if that works for people, to go through the various applicants, talk about them, and then make some decisions on who the board thinks should be interviewed for that position. I don't think that you can do that really at a regular meeting, so I think a special meeting, just with that as its focus, is the best. So I'm just giving you some forewarning to bring your calendars so that we can take a look at a potential special meeting date to do that sometime in the beginning of January. And
Did you
that's,
say the 8th, Dr. Anderson?
yeah, the 8th is the first Saturday.
Yep.
And, that was just the nearest one, so I put that as a suggested one, but we can all take a look. It doesn't mean we can't do it at night, so I'm just trying to look. I think you probably should think of, 2 to 3 hours. I'm expecting about 25 applicants when everything's done. We'll get to that later, but I think that would be sufficient time to go through everything. If you want to do it at night, we could start and do it at night too, so I'm flexible.
And I appreciate you offering to, create a rubric of what we're what we're looking for, because I think that'll really help when we're reviewing them, be very clear about what we're looking for, and will help the process move along.
And at least it'll be what I think is criteria you might want to look for as you're reading the various ones.
Absolutely.
And will we also be deciding at that point then, the three you're advising that we have, you're recommending we have 3 different interview groups?
But we're going to get to that
That's coming up.
very soon.
Okay. That's-
So if we can go on, first discussion item is the update on the superintendent job posting. As we said, you all have access to that, so you can see it as people apply. At this point, we have had 2 individuals that have actually submitted materials for the job. I have had 4 additional individuals contact me to discuss the job position. I think all 4 of them will probably apply for the job. My guess is that most will apply over winter break. If you are a sitting superintendent, you have to weigh whether or not you're going to apply for a different superintendency, because if the district you're currently working at, finds that you're applying for outside jobs, that does create a certain atmosphere, because, they think you're looking to leave, and that just creates, so before superintendents that already are seated superintendents look at applying for a job, they want to weigh what things are in their own district. Many of them will meet with at least their board president to talk about the situation, because most will want a letter of recommendation. I expect most of the applicants come over winter break. I do think there may be some as the weekends come, but in the end, I'm thinking that my guesstimate's about 25 applicants that we're going to have. We are posted not only on all the state's website, which is the Wisconsin Career Academy, and the weekend. We're not posted on WASB for obvious reasons, but the information all gets disseminated in the same place, and we're also on the Diversity Network. So there are diversity job boards throughout the nation, and we're on all that, because in fact even our opening has little insignia about diversity. So hopefully as many candidates are learning about the position as possible. As I said, they're already asking questions, and by the end January 2nd, we will have a final number for what to start reviewing.
It seems to me that the last time we went through this process, we did have probably 2 or 3 applicants that asked us not to share the fact that they were applying for that position until...
The board does not need to release the names of applicants in the preliminary.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Once it goes to the finals, then those names have to be released to the public.
Right.
So when we select whatever number it is, that those names do not have to be released to the press. But once the final candidates that the board would interview, they have to be released to the press. So.
Yep.
And then just going with that is the interview process and interview teams. Between now and the beginning of January, I think it's good to start thinking about who you would like to have on interview teams. What my thought is one interview team should be the administrative council. These are individuals who are going to work very closely with the new superintendent. There's going to be a strong relationship. So I would say one interview team should be that group. That's about 15 individuals to work on. A second one, I think, should be made of staff. What my recommendation there is to send out, as I would send out a notice to all staff asking which ones would be interested. Depending on how many individuals would apply, we would then take a look at the people that said they would be interested, try to come up with a representative number that would represent each of the buildings and as much as possible each of the categories, so that we would have teaching staff, support staff, on each of those, so that those individuals, because like I said, the more individuals that get a chance to take a look at the first round of candidates and then send candidates to the board, the greater support network that the individual will have once they come, because more people will have seen them and will be able to go back and say, we looked at the candidates and we believe that these candidates had qualities that we felt would make a good superintendent.
What sort of numbers in searches you've participated in the past, where and how many did you include community members in terms of participating on the actual interview teams?
Well, before I came here, I was at Belmont, and I helped them with the same process. And they had community members that were on the same team now. Basically, we met in a gym. COVID was prevalent at that time. So we met in the gymnasium, spaced chairs apart. And we had both staff and community in the same one. So, and the administrative team there was small. Basically, it was the superintendent and high school principal, assistant principal, and the special ed. So there was basically 4 individuals. So they were in the same one. It wasn't necessary to have a separate one for that. I have been in interviews that have had, well, my first interview in Mount Horeb, I think, had 30 people in the audience when I walked in the door. So I knew that no matter what answer I gave, not everybody was going to like it. I've been in interviews where they've been broadcast on television in front of the whole community during the interview process. So I've had like town hall meetings which was part of the interview process. So, and I've had them where they met with one person. So there is no magic number. I think what I have come over the years to believe is that if individuals have a chance to participate in the process, when the person is hired, there's a larger support network for that individual in the opening days, because people have had a chance to say, look, I had the opportunity, I saw the candidates, these are the candidates we thought were good, so that there's already a little base of support for that individual. Community members, so I think a second team you'd want to consider would be staff, and find out how many people are interested. Now, if you get 50, I'm not telling you to put 50 in a room. I'm saying we'd take a look at that 50 and we'd come up with a body so that we know that all the buildings would be represented in the different ones, so, we can take a look.
I think we had about 20, somewhere between 20 and 25, I think, in the initial committee last time. Wasn't that about?
I don't know.
It was a room full.
Yeah.
I remember. Christine?
How do you gather feedback from all of these folks? And it sounds like you're doing, like when you did the previous search, you did like a committee structure, which is a very different way of hiring than gathering a lot of input from a lot of different constituencies. So I'm curious to know, how do we gather input? And the other thing that we need to think about is, once that input is gathered, what is that information used for? Because people who give input and then something different happens, how do we kind of manage that? So I think we need to be really clear about, are they making a recommendation? Or are they just providing feedback? You know what I mean? Like, just being really clear about that process.
I think when we had ours before, we wanted everybody's opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, and it all comes back to the board.
Mm-hmm.
The board's involved in it, we listen to everybody, and then the board kind of has to make a call.
So is it only verbal? Can we get written feedback?
Well, I would do it a little different, so.
Okay,
We
that's
did
fine.
do written feedback last time.
What I would do is I would have, and then we determine number of interview committees, because the other one you might want to take a look at is having parents and community members. There may be individuals in the community that you think represent different portions of the community.
Mm-hmm.
You might give them an invite to come in, so you could have 3 committees. You'd run them all at the same time. Candidates would go from one to the other. The way that I think would be, that I would recommend, is, let's say you have 3 committees. They interview those candidates on the same day. I meet with those committees at the end. I meet with them each individually and then as a composite to basically have them go through a selection process as they have their discussions on each of the candidates. Which candidate did you interview that you felt would be worthy to go to the board for a final interview, and that if they were selected, you would be satisfied or happy? That way, let's say you interview 7. I'm just picking a number.
Mhm.
Let's say that they come up with 3 or 4 among the 3 groups and say, you know, these 3 or 4, we think that if any one of those were selected as superintendent, we would be okay. And then that goes to the board, and then you pick the final candidate. So it's not so much that you're asking each of those for individual input to you. You know that when they send it to you, the candidates that they say, this, you know, we're sending this one on, they know that if you selected this, they would be fine with that candidate. Now, they could select, you know, you might have a great crop. They may say 6 of the 7. Now, that would be highly unlikely. I mean, in all the times I've done this in the past, there would be, let's say you interview 7. There will be 2 that rise to the top in every group, boom. I mean, in past practice, there will be 2 that everybody likes and you put down right away. There will be 3 and 4 that are mixed, you know, and then they will talk and they, you know, they'll finally will decide yay or nay. So they're going to be real high with maybe 2 groups, maybe 1 group, you know, didn't see them as high. But usually, and you're going to have probably 2 that most groups say, you know, the person might be okay, but not for us. You know, there almost is always a natural selection process, and they would come into you. So the way I would see then the board is you would get the candidates from the first 3 interview. They would then determine which ones they felt would be, you know, good superintendent material for this district, and they would pass that name on to the board, and then the board would see it all. Now remember, you're also in the front of the process, because you see all the applicants, and you determine which ones you think are deserve an interview. So you take the paper, we have all the discussions, you determine which ones you think deserve an interview. Then the first round of interview committee will sort that down to a smaller number, and then you will come back and interview as a full board for a final selection. I have found that to be successful in the past. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but it gives a lot of involvement, and it gives you have the, basically in the first round, you select who's going to be interviewed, and in the end, you select the final candidate.
Go ahead.
Would there be room for like a hybrid of that? So what I'm hearing you say is the committees are made up of people, and perhaps a lot of people, up to 30?
Yeah, well, you could have 3 groups, and each one could easily have 15, so you could have 45 people.
Okay. What if, because I like the idea of, you know, what would be almost like acceptable to move forward. Like, I could see working with this person, there's pros and cons of this person, pros and cons, but, you know, the 2 would be, okay. What about that as well as written, so we can see why people chose the ones that they chose?
Yeah, we could ask that. We could do at the end. What it would simply be is, as you're talking about it, if they decided that you were the people who interviewed, and they said, you know, we're passing Kate and Craig on, and we'd ask, well, why? So they would write down, you know, we thought Kate because of da-da-da, we thought Craig because of da-da-da, you know? And then you could even, if there was some, they'd say, well, we didn't include Bruce because of, or we didn't include Wayne because of XXX, so, you know, I'll go that.
Yeah.
So then you could have, here's why we thought this would be, and here's why we didn't put this one.
Yeah, I just think with the number of people you're talking, the perspectives are going to be so different, especially if we're going to do a good job having lots of representation from community, parents, staff, and aid council and so on. So to be forced to groupthink, like, okay, I'll go with Kate. I love Kate, she's wonderful. But to be forced, you know, you might feel forced for that. So if you're going to be in that position where you're going to pick a few, to at least be able to put down what you think are the pros and cons. I think it would be a nice hybrid of, I mean, like I said, I love the idea. I really like the idea that people are kind of buying in by saying these 2 or 3, but why? Like, what is the evidence for that, and why not some other folks? In short, really short.
I think it's fine to do, even fill out like an individual, like these are the 2 I would choose. I just don't want to, so I want input, but I don't want too much input.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I want to know why they think they'd be great candidates, but I just want to be careful about opening it up too much, I
Now, the
guess.
other thing that you might consider that I've seen done, especially in districts the size of McFarland, is what I'll call a public presentation. In other words, let's say you have 3 finalists. So before you interview them individually, you already know these are the ones passed on, and you have another meeting where you invite the public to come to the PAC.
Mm-hmm.
And you say you're going to get a chance to meet the candidates and ask any questions. What that does for you is it allows you to see how the individual communicates, in a public setting, because the superintendent will always have to communicate in public settings.
Mm-hmm.
You can't rehearse it, you can't, there's no way to practice
Mhm.
for it. People ask questions and give responses. So,
Well, you couldn't, in that kind of situation, you couldn't just leave it wide open for a big group of people, and then you've got 3 in front. Wouldn't you have to give them some kind of notice ahead of time on?
I've been in those situations, and usually you have a moderator, so that, so like if you're asking questions, you can ask, I've got this question from the audience, the people would like to know, what do you think about X? And then, let's say there's 3 people, you just 1, 2, 3, and then next time you go 2, 3, 1.
Who deems what question is appropriate and which one might not be?
Well,
I mean, there's got to be
my
some
guess
sort
is
of a
if you did
filter.
that, I'd be the moderator, and if someone
Yeah.
submitted a question that obviously you couldn't ask for whatever reason, I just wouldn't ask that one. But what it does is it gives people people in the audience, you might have like Angie and Jeff walking around, please write your question out. They would go pick them up, they would give them to me. I would then read the question for them to respond. And you put a time limit on, you say, we're going to do this from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. It's a chance for you to see the candidates, and if you have some questions, just submit those. But what it does is it gives you a chance to see how they're reacting, in a group setting, for questions that are just coming,
I really like that idea. I was going to say, Arlen and Craig, have we ever done anything like that?
No.
No. I think that's really kind of a neat idea,
Uh-uh.
because it literally puts that person, we see them
Are
having
they
to
all going to be
respond.
asked the same question?
Yeah, I would think.
yeah.
And they all-
Now, the
think you have
advantage
to do
is,
that.
depending on the question, is that sometimes you're the first,
Yeah.
sometimes you're the third, so sometimes you get to hear 2 responses before it gets to you, but they rotate.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's something you might want to think about. What it does is it opens up to the people that did not participate in the process to see the final candidates. And what the board's role is to watch the interaction. So it's not so much, you'll have your own chance to ask questions, it's more to, see how each of the candidates is responding so that you get a sense of feel, okay, so when, the media contacts, how are they about answering certain questions off the cuff? Now, that would mean if you didn't have a question, you wanted to submit it, I wouldn't, read that, but I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying you might want to think about that. It
Okay.
does give it an opportunity to see the candidates in another format, and it gives a chance for staff and community to come into the PAC and to, at least see who your final candidates would be.
I think we opened it up to our initial committee, let's say 25.
Yeah.
And in a less formal kind of setting, it's not in the PAC, it's not, the candidates up front with the people, but it was in this room, and all of the folks on that committee had an opportunity to ask each candidate questions and each candidate the same questions to see how they responded. And when we did get down to, we went, I don't know, we go 8, 4, and 2 or
Yeah.
something like that, I think. And by the time we got down to the last two, what happened was really the way that we would have preferred it to happen, asking them the same questions. They answered them in two very different ways. They were two very different candidates that were both considered finalists, but approached things in different ways. And it allowed the committee a contrast in finalists rather than trying to find the little minute details that might separate one or the other. These two final candidates had very different, I think, views on how a district needs to be run or should be run.
And remember, one of the things that it's not scientific at all, but you're going to get a feel, all right? And like I always say, the relationship between a board and the superintendent is like a marriage, all right? So, you're going to get some sense of a feel, and it's not scientific, I can't tell you anything, but it is fairly, it's not uncommon that as, somebody is going to click, and for reasons you're going to think, this person we think is going to be a better fit for this community. And you won't be able to put your finger on it, but it'll just be, in listening to all of them, we got down,
That very much became a part of the final
but it's going to
decision.
be, and I wish I could explain it and give you some type of better rationale, but I can't. But I can tell you that it happens.
We all know, you walk into a store and somebody asks, well, what is it that you want? And you kind of say, well, I'm not sure, but I'll know it when I see it. And you do. And that happened very, very distinctly in the last process. It came down to these final two. And there was really very little gray area. They were just two distinctly different folks wanting to reach the same goal, but they were going to get there in two different ways. And it allowed the committee to be pretty comfortable in their final recommendation to us as a board.
So anyway, I think that's something you might want to think about.
Sure.
If you want, like I will send out something tomorrow to staff to start finding out what kind of interest we have. If you'd like, depending on, now I expect that there'd be quite a few that would want to participate. I mean,
We have to limit it.
yes, but I mean, I expect a number of people to say they'd be interested. I'd be surprised if you didn't. So then what you need to think about is, do you want to have a third one with community, parents and community? And if so, then I think it works better if you basically come and say, look, who are people within this community that as a board, we would like them to see the candidates and give us their impressions going forward. Because to make it to the whole community, I mean, if you got 100 responses, there'd be no way for me to determine which one should be on or not, and
That part has to be treated differently than the other. That's not one, I think, where you go out and solicit people that, would want to participate in the hiring process. I suspect that if you did put a cap on that you could get 150 people wanting to be part of that process.
yeah, and I think you need a smaller number,
Yeah.
but there may be people that, from your
We've
time
all
that
been
you've
around
lived
long enough.
that would say, we think
Yep.
these individuals, and then I could contact them and ask if they would want. So it'd be simply thinking of who might you want. It might be past employees, it might be past board members, the list goes on.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the village board president is Carolyn, is that her name?
Yes.
Wow, yeah.
Yep.
I'm thinking somebody like her, might want to be interested. But, so think about that, because really over the month of December, we need to think what I'll do, and I think a council is easy.
Yep.
I think getting staff is, once I get that, I'll send out the list saying, here's all the people that responded that they would like, here's where they have, and then, here's, I think, an acceptable number, and we could go about that. And then if you want a community and parent, just think, who would you want to have on that? And at our next meeting, you
Yeah.
could give that to me, and then I could make calls, and you can come up with something, and I would help the various groups with their interview questions to make sure that, they were asking, the right questions. Not that there's a right or wrong, but there are some questions you shouldn't ask, and we just key them, these are questions
Yep.
that, you really shouldn't ask.
No, I think that's fine. Anybody have any issues or problems with at least starting the process in this manner? I mean, we had no trouble getting folks to participate in the process. We turned down, a
Yeah,
lot of folks.
I'm not worried about that, really.
Right.
I gave this a lot of thought, though, when I was going through this today, and I really, so you're looking at probably 45 individuals.
Could be.
Yeah,
Ish.
three,
Yeah.
15, something like that. That's much more than I was thinking. And what kind of, I don't know, again, my bias is obvious, but I was thinking of that, let's say you have, 10 teachers. I don't think you'd probably even have that many. If you try to make that second group representative, you're looking out of 10 out of 45. So only 1 out of 4 teachers. And at least in my mind, I'm going like, they're the ones who have the direct contact with the kids. They're the ones who are actually, teaching. And it kind of scares me. That was my reaction 7 years ago when I resigned, I retired. I didn't say anything, I never mentioned anyone, but I just felt like there was not enough input from enough teachers. That was my
In the
feeling.
last superintendent search?
Mhm. Yeah. And again, I never said anything, but at that point I was thinking, I'm gonna just step
Well,
away.
and that could very well be, and
Yeah.
I wish I had better recall of the exact circumstance as to,
Well, that's.
maybe that was all the teachers that expressed.
No,
interest.
and that's right. And I don't mean to,
I understand.
casting blame or same thing like that, but I just feel like that really made me give pause because you only have one of those 3 groups where you're actually having educators, I shouldn't say educators, but teachers
Yep.
actually involved. And I said, wow, this could be a relatively small percentage, if you had 1/4 of them.
No,
And that's just some.
Do you remember the time before when we up at Conrad Albion, we had a close to 25 people committee. Do you remember that?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about, Arlen, so
That was, here I get brain fade.
that's all right.
when we
Well,
brought
Scott
principal
Brown
on.
was your superintendent before.
What's that?
Scott was your superintendent.
No, it
you
was before
forgot.
Scott. Scott
Yeah.
worked for,
Oh,
God,
Brittingham?
yeah, Ken Brittingham.
Ken, okay.
Yeah, and
Well,
that
you're
was,
really
that
going
was,
back now, Arlen, because
well, that was that
Ken was
way.
superintendent
That was
before
a
me.
22 or 25 person it was a committee, staff, and everybody. And there was, it worked through pretty decent,
Yeah.
and so representation, yes.
Yeah.
You need fair and equal representation and great communication. Everybody's just got to settle in and work forward, and it really showed. I mean, that was quite an event.
So what I'm hearing, having gone through none of these processes, is that there's been a model that the district has used for a number of times, but now Dr. Anderson's suggesting some other changes to that, which
Sure.
is great. I mean, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
I love the ideas that are bouncing around. I think we just need to be clear, once again, what model we're going to use. Are we going to do the different groups? What kind of input we're going to get from them and how we're going to use it? Like
Yeah.
if it's just suggestion or recommendation or whatever, like Kate's saying, but just be very, very clear in that process, because taking Bruce's comment to a more of a meta level, I have heard feedback about
Oh, yeah.
previous searches. And I think if we're clear about what we're looking for, what their role is, then that might take away some of that frustration of what role they played.
Uh-huh.
So that just a thought and
And
comment.
things are very different now than they were.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
any of our other searches. The whole educational process has
Right.
just kind of been turned upside down, and we need people that can
Right.
have a vision of, what can get us back to whatever close to normal is.
Well, and the other thing I'll say is, I know that, like that, we'll know it when we see it. There's the idea of this, like, they'll fit, and that's a euphemism often for what, who looks like a superintendent, and the fact that we've never had a female superintendent. We know it when we see it, we might fall to male.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's literally how we see it. I think it's how we feel it.
Right, yes.
And you know, when, it's like if you and I have a dialogue,
Mhm.
all of a sudden, I could understand where you're coming from, where you're going with it.
Yeah.
I like your decision-making process.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think that's,
No, I see what you're saying, Arlen. I'm with you on that. But I think we do need to think about that. And that's why I'm really pushing for more standardized looking at, because the feeling might be a little bit biased, and whether or not they fit here.
Because of the history.
Because of, well, in all of our biases, we all
All of
have
our
it.
life, yeah.
So the being a little more objective with rubrics will be helpful. I mean, the fact that, our teaching force is 80% female, and we don't have 80% of superintendents female, there's something off.
What happened in the past, that, to my recollection, was we honestly had very few female
I would think.
applicants, and I don't believe we had any applicants of color.
So why did-
maybe
yeah.
we can go out
Right.
and figure out a way to get more females and more applicants of color, to look at us as a place they might want to land.
Right, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is what stopped the female applicants. Why did you not choose them to go to the 842? And if you have no criteria that you use, it's just because they fit or not,
Right.
it's hard to justify why you would choose someone over another.
Hmm.
And that, to me, could get us into legal issues. So, which is why I keep suggesting that we're very clear about what we're looking for,
I
so
agree.
that we're not making a decision based on a feeling, we're making a decision based on evidence of what we are looking for.
I agree. Anybody else? Should we move along?
But keep thinking about it, because it's going to come quick.
Yes.
I mean, January is going to be here a lot faster, and once the applicants, once January 2nd, the applicants have applied.
Well, and the holiday's in there. The holiday changes everything.
Well,
It changes who's at work and who's not at work, and when you can have meetings, when you can have, it's just December's a difficult month to have to put a lot into.
And this third interview team, I think we need to just start brainstorming that piece now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we
Because
just
there's-
send them to you?
Yeah, because
I
there's
agree.
probably people we've all thought of that maybe isn't on anyone else's,
Yep.
radar, so, and that's the point,
Yep.
right, so.
Yep, and then we can talk about that at our next meeting. And I'd be happy to be the one who calls and invites each of those. But you're going to know those people much
Yes.
better than I am.
Yes.
The next item is one I'm asking to put aside. We're going to have Jeff Finstead talk with the Student Council Night on Representatives, but this also is the same night as the induction ceremony for National Honor Society, so they asked if they could move that to the next meeting, obviously because they're having their dinner and all that, so I said that would be fine, so I'll put that on the next meeting. And then we go to our action items. The first one is on our district calendar. So this is the one that we have worked with we sent out. First, you've seen it. All of the staff have seen it. Zerk has seen it. It probably isn't exactly what you thought in the very beginning, but in the end, basically 96% of your staff were looking for something like this. Now, I will tell you that collaboration time was an important element, so we are working at the admin council to determine how we can use the professional development days that we have to make them, to use each of those days to provide, what time we'll use for what I call the development training, and what time will be used for work time, and what time will be used for collaboration time. so that we have a similarity among all. In fact, that's on our next administrative council agenda. But this calendar, I think, at least has the support of the vast majority of your staff. And I think once it is a final, we'll put it on our website and send it out so the people that are, can start planning their next school year and the breaks. But it needs to be approved first.
Yep. I would move to adopt the 2022-2023 school calendar as presented. Do I have a second?
Before you do, Craig, I just, again, it was one thing that I was just disappointed that we couldn't make bigger changes. I know I spent a lot of time working, and I know a bunch of you did as well. And I really feel if there's one item that could probably work to help the morale of teachers, it would be a change of the calendar. And I recognize everything that you said, Dr. Anderson, and it was rejected in some ways by our own teachers. But I'm just trying to figure out how we do that and how do we get to change that mindset. And, I think it's as good as we could hope for. So, I'll probably vote for it, but it's just kind of disappointed we couldn't have thought bigger. And I'm hoping in the future we can do that.
And that's gonna happen with almost everything.
Yeah.
You get to a point in a process where, boy, you know in your heart what you would like to have the end result be, and it's tough when you find out that that's not really a feasible end result. It's kind of the old in the programming, if, then. If something is this way, then this happens. And that's, unfortunately, I think we all understand that our teachers are in a bad way, and we want to do whatever we can to improve the morale of our teachers. And I think we've made great efforts, frankly, to come up with out-of-the-box thinking and, creative ways to address a problem that frankly, anytime a calendar attempts have been made to change it, the process becomes very long and drawn out. And the reason the calendar process was not long and drawn out for the past, 5 to 10 years, I would suspect, is that there was very little change in the calendar from one year to the next. So the process became, I think the impression is that the process was less complicated or difficult than it really was. Putting this calendar together was one of the most difficult things that a board and the staff do each year, and it doesn't seem that way to the public, I don't think.
No.
Well, I think one thing is all staff had input into it, and really, almost all staff did in the very beginning. They were, what ideas would they like to have considered? We built out several different models that people look at, so then people could tell what model they like the best. So I think at least the calendar that if you approve it tonight will be one that, staff have seen and given their comments on, multiple times.
And I honestly think, Bruce, this is just my opinion, 1 of 5, that in order to address some of these things that we all know we'd love to address with the teachers, we're gonna have to take a serious look at starting earlier and ending later, or year-round school.
Yeah, it's in education, this is where Dr. Pribanow, you and I I'm not sure you could sometimes quantify things, but this is one thing where, and just talking with you, Dr. Anderson, I think there's a lot of research out there that says there are advantages, and you can show them, you can see the advantages, and yet we just can't seem to get there. And I don't fault anyone. I want to applaud you because I think you were very open. I think in the end we looked at everything's there. I just kind of stating, it's like, just frustrated that we couldn't have gone bigger. But
Understood.
That's right. It's first step.
Understood.
Well, and I think going forward, because you've got clearly a lot of different opinions on what would be ideal, it's almost teachers discussing with each other too, kind of ways to make it work. It's not an all or nothing thing. So we tried this year and unfortunately couldn't come up with anything, but I would also encourage teachers to talk amongst each other, because I think there was like a large group that felt one way and another group that felt the other. So how do we meet in the middle?
You're right, you're right.
Becky, it can be tough to reach consensus, you know, because every teacher's situation is different. You know, it's not feasible to start earlier and end later for some, you know, given their family situation. It's not feasible to even consider year-round school because of their family circumstance. Anything else? Arlen, Christine, you got anything to add?
Still need a second.
Well, I don't know, have we even made the
I made the
first?
motion.
You did make it? I'll give the second then.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Right now, you get to make the motion on the 4K calendar, because this is actually something new for me, because in my past districts, 4K was held in so that everybody has the same calendar. But here you have off-site 4K.
Correct.
So they also create a calendar, so when they looked at ours, they created theirs, but you also then need to approve the 4K calendar, which they have come up with and submitted to us.
I couldn't see significant differences.
It's probably not, they're
In-
probably
in the
very
two,
similar, that's why they looked at ours to create theirs.
Yeah.
It seems as though they're lined up pretty well. I would look for a motion to approve the 4K calendar as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the 4K calendar.
Thank
as
you, Kate.
presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Christine. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, next is action on recommended WEVA Destination Career Academy and Insight School, Wisconsin, Statute 118.408G.
And you will have this probably on every agenda, and what it is with primarily our virtual school,
Yep.
is that there are people that come in, and for one reason or another, it doesn't work, and then we send them back to the resident districts.
Typically, it's failure to engage,
Yes.
failure
So
to participate.
there are 4 individuals on this list that they want to send back to their resident districts. And I wrote a sample motion in the McFarland minutes.
Yep.
I'll make,
Anyone care to make that motion?
I can make that. I move to recommend the presented students return to their home district from the WEVA, the
Destination Career Academy and
Career Academy,
Insight,
thank you.
Wisconsin.
Yes, and the Insight School of Wisconsin as allowed under Wisconsin Statute 118.408G.
I'll second.
Thank you, Arlen. Any other discussion?
I have a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
2 things. One, I think Dr. Cutler would be wonderful, and whoever she thinks on the interview. She's the head of school for WEVA. I think that she should be part of the process.
Where does
Second,
she live, though?
Is
I
it
want to say
Cutler?
the west side of Madison.
Okay.
Cutler, usual spellings, C-U-T-L-E-R?
Sarah, S-A-R-A.
Okay.
So I'll send you, and maybe she'll have other people too. The second thing is, I sat in on their retreat a few weeks ago, and I think having her present what their strategic plan and some of the new things that they're doing, which are getting at some of these failure to engage issues. I
Yeah.
mean, they're really doing some great innovative stuff.
That'd be great.
She's wonderful. She hasn't even been here a year, so rather than having me present what was shared, I think you should meet her.
Absolutely.
So we can
We
Okay,
should
figure
bring
that
her
That's an
in.
excellent
We should
idea.
bring her in
Yeah,
I can
and
do
have
that.
her,
I'll make
have her
an
address the
arrangement.
board.
Yeah.
That'd be
That'd
great.
be fun.
okay, so.
I've never met, I've never had a chance to
Well,
meet
she's
her.
new, so, but I was really, really impressed with her and
Cool.
got to sit in the retreat, so
Yeah.
that was good.
Great idea.
Did Bruce's motion get a second?
Yes, Arlen seconded.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, let's see, that's the calendar, 4K.
Adjournment.
You want to talk about your trip?
Well, I'm leaving Thursday night, actually 10 o'clock at night. Going to take off another thing off my bucket list. We're going to the Ice Hotel in Sweden. So I'm
Where in
looking-
Sweden is that?
It is about 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle. So I bought my brand new
Better have a
merino wool undergarments to keep me
Undergarment.
warm.
And you better have a flashlight.
We have that because there's only 3 hours of daylight.
Gonna say.
So I'll be gone about a week, but you're in capable hands. So, and I wrote next week's blog also today. So I wrote 2 blogs so that I wouldn't miss the pattern. And I'll be back the following Saturday. So I'll send pictures.
Please.
So we're really hoping to see the Northern Lights. My wife has never seen those. I would see those quite a bit when I was a kid. But so
Where would you see it?
I saw them in where I grew up,
Wisconsin.
northern Wisconsin.
Oh.
There
Well, it's
wasn't,
gotta be dark. I
there
know.
wasn't much ambient light. The
Yeah.
nearest town had 500 people,
Yeah.
and that was the nearest town a couple miles away.
That's why
so.
it's tough to get here. You gotta travel to see them around here. Okay, we look for a motion to adjourn.
Like that.
Bruce?
I'll
Se-
second.
Kate, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Great job tonight, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone. We
Have a
will
safe
see
trip
you
home.
later.